Okay, yesterday's lesson was over relations. It's where we took ordered pairs and we displayed them using tables, using graphs, using maps. Well, today we are going to extend that lesson and talk about whether that relation is or is not a function. We covered this a lot in 8th grade, so it's not anything new for you. There's a couple different ways to tell. If it's listed in a table, if x's repeat, it is not a function. If it's listed on a graph, you use the vertical line test, and we're going to talk about that here in just a second. And then if it's listed as a map, the best way to determine if it's a function or not is you cannot go two places at once. That shouldn't be any new information for any of you, but we're just going to cover back over that again. So a function is a relation in which each element of the domain is paired with exactly one element in the range, which means from your x's, they can only go to one place. If I got up and walked out of this room and went into Mr. Ship's room, that would be fine. If me and you got up and walked into Mr. Ship's room, it would be fine. Two people can go to the same room, but what cannot happen is I cannot get up and go to leave this room and go into Mr. Ship's room and Ms. Holmes' room at the same time. You cannot go to two places at once. So on a map like this where -3 goes to 5, 0 goes to 3, 2 goes to 2, and 4 goes to -1, that's fine. Everyone has a place where they go. What you cannot do is if you have something that looks like this. After we put them in order from least to greatest, if 3 wants to go to 4, 4 needs to go to 5, and 4 needs to go to 4, 4 cannot go to two places at the same time. So this is not a function. This is fine, this is a function. This is not a function. Looking at a graph, we use that vertical line test. You take a vertical line, and if there's anywhere you can draw an up and down line on that graph where it would cross the graph more than once, it is not a function. This is a function, because if I came through and drew vertical lines through here, it's only going to touch that graph one time. Some situations that are not a function by using the vertical line test would be a graph that looks like this. Because if I took a vertical line and drew it right here, it would cross this graph 1, 2, 3 times. And the rule is that it can only cross once. So this is not a function. So you would say not a function. And if you needed an explanation, you would say that it doesn't pass the vertical line test. So does not pass VLT. So those are some ways to tell if something is a function or not, and the explanations behind it. Y'all are all masters at that. So let's move on to something that is new. Actually, on page 49, there was some, this is where you can also see the vertical line test. Function, not a function because we would be able to draw it right here. And this is a function because even though I could draw a line through the y-axis, it is open and closed. It's called a step function. We'll get into that a little bit later, but just know that this also is a function. Okay? Here's a couple different representations of functions. Those are also in your calculator. Also in your notes. Yesterday we talked about tables, mapping, and graphs. And then equations are also good ways. A lot of times you can just plug those into your calculator and graph it, and then use that vertical line test as well. Something that's new this year is when you use function notation. So if you see f with x in parentheses after that, that is read as f of x. It replaces y. Last year we did a lot of y equals mx plus b and problems of that nature. Well, now in place of y, you're putting an f of x. It is your dependent variable. Depending on what you input for your independent variable, depending on what you put in for x, yields you different answers here. So this is your dependent variable. If f of x is equal to -4x plus 7, and that is your original problem, when you get a problem that says what is f of 2, That just means everywhere there is an x in the problem, you need to put a 2. So you would say -4, and in place of the x, I've put a 2 plus 7. Anytime you plug a number in, you need to make sure that you plug it in inside of parentheses. So -4 times 2 is -8, plus 7 is going to equal -1. I need to see this, where you plugged in for your work, and then I also need to see what the final answer is. It is okay for you to plug this into your calculator to get the -1, but I need to see this as your work and this as your final answer. Okay? Here where it says f of -3 plus 1, we're still using the same function, but it's saying after you find the function of -3, we're going to add 1 to it. So that's going to look like this. You have -4 parentheses. I'm adding in a -3 everywhere there's an x. And then once that problem is completed, I want to add 1 to it. Once again, you can plug this into your calculator just like this, and your final answer should be 20. We worked that out together today in class, so if you need to see it step by step, resort back to your notes on that, or it's also kind of done out here for you using orders of operations. Homework is sent out on the Remind tonight. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what those were, but they're on the Remind app, and they're also printed on the bottom of your notes.